Welcome to Brick by Brick, a podcast produced by Move Your Mind, committed to changing the construction industry one conversation at a time. This episode touched on a range of subjects that are just so important when it comes to mental health across the board. And when we look at the construction industry, it's just highlighting issues that are happening everywhere in society. But we've got an industry that is just dominated by cultural issues that just haven't changed over a long period of time. And it was really important to have this chat and focus on areas that are really difficult to talk about, like suicide. It's something that's not pleasant to talk about, it's very uncomfortable to talk about, and we can often feel or be made to feel that by talking about it, we could be doing more damage. And it's actually not true. Research shows that talking about it does help other people, and it helps people to learn how to get help, how to educate themselves, how to talk more openly about it, how to know where to go. And the work that Jorgen is doing and mates in construction are doing is incredible. It's saved lives, literally saved lives. I learnt a huge amount about the topic of suicide when I did a TEDx talk a number of years ago, and I centered the talk on this topic. And I learned a number of facts. One of them was that every 40 seconds, someone around the world commits suicide, which is an incredibly alarming statistic. It's hard to wrap your head around. And that's the people that actually go through and commit it. So it's not, that's discounting all of the people that are having those thoughts every day and not acting on it. So it's a terrifying thing to think, to realize how many people are actually suffering and just grappling with the thought of doing something like that. So we can't talk about this enough. And the other thing I learned was a story about a Golden Gate Bridge survivor, someone who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived. It's a place that people often jump off in an attempt to take their lives. And this person, Kevin Hines, who I have sort of studied a lot of his work, and he's a big mental health advocate in the US, and he shared his story, and he had jumped off the bridge attempting to take his own life, survived, and the realization he had in the split-second moment, when he came off the bridge, was that he didn't want to die. And he was falling, into the water, thinking that was it. He's made the worst decision of his life and couldn't do anything about it. Luckily, he survived, but the majority of people didn't. And it's a pretty hard-hitting fact, and it shows that people don't really want to do this. Every other survivor, I can't remember the exact number, it's about 40 to 50. Every one of them said the same thing, that the moment they pushed themselves off that bridge, they instantly regretted it. And I think it's a really important thing to remind ourselves of. When we're suffering from mental health related conditions, it can feel like there's no solution. And often when things have been difficult for a long time, it becomes elevated and we can't even remember what it felt like to be okay, and we lose all hope. And in those extreme moments, it can feel like there's no way out. So the message is, there is always hope. There's always a way out. And I always say that when it comes to mental health, the one thing that we should not do is nothing. So just do something. If you're suffering, don't suffer in silence. Go and call someone. Go and see a psychologist. If you don't know where to go, you can simply go onto Google and type in mental health helpline and find the resource available. But by taking that one first step, you're going to open up the door to the next step and the next step. And before you know it, you're making momentum and finding ways to work through this. The first step's always the hardest. About 5 years ago, I was speaking at a warehouse on a Friday afternoon, and we finished the talk, and one of the leaders in that warehouse came up to us and told us a story that that he had an active plan to take his own life. And he was seen as a leader in both the company and at home. He was the kind of person that everyone actually looked to for answers. He was the one that solved everyone's problem. And no one would have ever dreamed of him having an issue, let alone such a severe issue. But he had been bottling up these emotions for 20 years. He hadn't talked about it. He didn't feel like it was okay to talk about it. He didn't know how to. And he felt like he was a burden on other people because his job was to support everyone. That's what he felt. And he heard us talking about these kind of topics, and something clicked. And it wasn't that we did anything out of the ordinary. It was just the fact that he was exposed to this information at a time when he needed to hear it. And that triggered him to come and speak to myself and the HR manager. And he was directed to get help. And not only did he get the help that he needed, he worked through these issues, came back into the organisation, and actually became an advocate for the issue and started sharing his story to help other people. And it was just such an incredible thing. And I've personally witnessed so many situations like that, and that's only in my very small window of the work that I've done. So it just shows that the more we talk about this, the more we can change this conversation. It literally saves lives. So these are really important topics. Thank you again for listening to Brick by Brick. We're going to have new episodes each week, and a huge thank you to Lendlease for sponsoring us. Jorgen is a plumber and a suicidologist. He is a suicide survivor and has lived experience with mental illness. He started working at 15 as an apprentice plumber in Denmark, and experienced a period of mental ill health, ultimately influencing his decision to migrate to Australia at the age of 23. Jorgen founded Mates in Construction, which has made waves in changing the construction industry. He's dedicated his life to helping with suicide prevention, and I found it so insightful having him on here. As I've said in previous episodes, mental health is a huge issue in the construction industry. There's 1 million construction workers in Australia. It's an area that's underserviced, and we're doing this to bring light to the industry and to spark a conversation. Lendlease is proudly sponsoring the Brick by Brick podcast. They're committed to the health and safety of their people and those who they work with, and have been acknowledged externally for their focus on providing healthy workplaces. Lendlease is certified as a global healthy workplace in recognition of their focus on employee health and well-being. The certification was granted by the Global Centre for Healthy Workplaces in October 2017, and in addition, they've won the multinational employer category for the 6 Global Healthy Workplace Awards. At Move Your Mind, we've been fortunate to work with Lendlease for a number of years, and we've seen firsthand that they take this seriously. They're not just trying to tick a box, they genuinely care about making change in the organisation. And further to that, Lendlease are a leader in driving the conversation about mental health on a broad level. They're not just trying to help in their organisation, it's about changing the construction industry and the way we view mental health as a whole. All right, Jorgen, thank you so much for making the time to come on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Nick.
Appreciate it. And I was saying beforehand, I looked up what, the work that you've done and read through, you've done a lot of things, and really impressive. And I think there's, this whole podcast is about mental health in the construction industry. So, feel really lucky to have you on. And, I'm sure you've got a lot of experience and insights into, into what we're talking about.
Well, I think my main qualification in this area is that I'm a plumber, and it's my industry. So I think that when we do these kind of things, actually having that inside knowledge can sometimes be really, really helpful.
Oh, absolutely. No, I think it can, being on the ground and having that inside knowledge goes a long way. So I guess that leads to the first question. Are you able to give our audience just a background on yourself and what you're now doing?
Well, I'm a plumber by trade, and the accent might reveal that I wasn't born in Australia. So I was born in Denmark, started work when I was 15 in the industry. And developed a mental illness, and was quite unwell for several years, and sort of migrated to Australia as part of my recovery, as part of reinventing myself as a well person. And but I also realized my employer was quite central in terms of how I got supported through my apprenticeship during a period of time where, frankly, I was perhaps not a very good employee because I was not very well. So that have sort of made mental health and suicide prevention in particular really important to me. So in Australia, I did what I think that migrants do the best. Pointed out to the Australians everything they did wrong, and why we need to do things more like we did in Denmark. So the natural progression from that was to become a union official, and as I was a union official for a number of years, and I got to lead one of the unions, and unfortunately lost several members to suicide, and again that sort of brought it up and made it very real, and it led to this idea that perhaps it was something that we actually needed to own as an industry, and that we as an industry actually needed to grab hold of and do something about, and that became the start of the major construction program that I was working on for about 14 years. So and I left mate last year and tried to work out what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I sort of started my own little consultancy where I do a few different bits and pieces around mental health, well-being, lived experience around suicide and mental health, and I also get to chair the Queensland Workplace Health and Safety Board.
Amazing. Well, congratulations on everything you've done, and Mates in Construction. It's such an important organization. So I think it's it is, and the more we've only this year really started to look deeply into the construction industry and target what we're doing into that industry, and the more we've done that, the more we've seen how important it is that you've spearheaded things like that, what you're doing. And we need to have these conversations, we need the resources, we need to do as much as we can on an ongoing basis to try and make these changes.
I think what was really important about Mates was that it was is really important about Mates is that it is an industry program. It's a place where normal sort of not natural allies came together and say, let's just put the petty politics of the day aside and lift above it to make a change for our industry. And I think that is increasingly becoming a model that other industries actually want to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's the thing. It's every one of us. We all have emotions. We all feel things. We all have ups and downs, and we need to be able to cut through all the cultural stuff. I think in organizations and in industries, it's like a microcosm of society where there's all these like sort of very long-term behaviors in place that these cultures that we need to chip away at changing and strip it back and just realize like everyone we're all the same. We all have issues, mental issues, we all have physical issues, and we need to know how to talk about it, how to get help.
Lendlease is proudly sponsoring the Brick by Brick podcast. They're committed to the health and safety of their people and those who they work with, and have been acknowledged externally for their focus on providing healthy workplaces. Lendlease is certified as a global healthy workplace in recognition of their focus on employee health and well-being. The certification was granted by the Global Centre for Healthy Workplaces in October 2017, and in addition, they've won the multinational employer category for the 6 Global Healthy Workplace Awards. At Move Your Mind, we've been fortunate to work with Lendlease for a number of years, and we've seen firsthand that they take this seriously. They're not just trying to tick a box. They genuinely care about making change in the organisation. And further to that, Lendlease are a leader in driving the conversation about mental health on a broad level. They're not just trying to help in their organisation, it's about changing the construction industry and the way we view mental health as a whole.
Yeah, and I think as human beings, we are a very communal animal. We really the herds and the communities we're in, whether that's workplaces or sports clubs or families, are really, really important to us. Often when it comes to mental health, we individualize it. We make it about personal resilience. We make it about personal strength. We make it about personal deficits. When quite often it's actually about the community not working as well as it should for us as individuals. So this idea of actually taking mental health and suicide prevention on as a collective responsibility actually starts looking at how does the whole community work rather than just the individual person within that community.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only way we can make longer term changes in this area, and it stems on all levels, right down to schooling and parenting and everything. That's how else can you make long term change unless we sort of change that whole conversation on every level.
If we try to change individuals, we will all fall back into our old habits if everything around us stays the same, because the way we behave is what comes natural to us based on the circumstance we find ourselves in. If we change the circumstances, then we will also change us.
Yeah, I like that. Like a nice simple way to put it. So in the construction industry, I guess two questions. Have you seen a shift in mental health and how that's dealt with in that industry? And as it stands right now, how much more work needs to be done?
I think that there's always going to be lots of work to be done, and it's very easy for us to focus on all the work we haven't done and forget about all the work we have done.
Yeah.
I look back at this industry since 2007, or even, I joined the industry in 1984 or 5 or something like that. So, but over that time, there's been an enormous change. And I think we really need to take credit for this. Right back from the start, when we came together and said, let's just deal with suicide prevention. Let's just try to make sure that we look after people when they're in crisis. To the point where in 2016 we had the leadership of the industry together, all the industry leaders, the directors of senior leaders of Lend-Lease, of Baden, so all the big companies came together with the senior union officials. Dave Noonan, the national secretary of the CFMEU, the national executive director of Master Builders, and spent half a day together in Sydney at a round table to say, what can we do better? And the really great thing about filling a room up with men is that it is absolutely chock-a-block full of testosterone, and none of us want to be just part of it. We all want to be the best. So we walked away from that meeting with really big ambitions about being the world's best and the world leaders and all those kind of things in mental health, and that led to the blueprint for better mental health and suicide prevention. Now, that would have been completely and utterly unthinkable in 2007. But in 2022, last time I spoke with mates, there's businesses representing about 160,000 workers in the industry signed up to the blueprint. So when you look at that in an industry with about 1 million, I think with about 900,000 workers, 160,000 workers out of that being covered by the blueprint is actually where you start coming to critical mass, where you change culture, where we actually really fundamentally, and the objective of mates, and this was very, very early on, right back in 2007, a number of us sat down and said, if we're going to do this, we don't just want to be caught up in the doing of things. We want to do things for a purpose. So we said, what would mates look like if we succeeded? What would the industry look like if we succeeded? And we devised this mantra saying that mates have succeeded when mates is no longer a program you run, but a way you do business. So if we can actually change the way that people do business, so mates is not actually necessary. And I think that's sort of the things that we're starting to see. That there's a whole heap of businesses doing all sorts of things that have nothing to do with mates, but is very much aligned with some of the ideas that mates started. And I think that's success.
That's fantastic. That's definitely success, and that's the idea. Like you're saying, how do we that's sustainable? How do we change an industry so it can be self-sustainable rather than just, I think a lot of things out there are about how do we just put a band-aid on it. But if you
Yeah.
can really, what you were talking about, dig in and make these changes, and essentially make yourself long-term, make yourself irrelevant, that's the job done. Then
The,
yeah.
the thing we're seeing now is that it's in Queensland, my home state. We know, like mental health is now starting becoming part of the supply mandates to governments. If you want to do government work, you need to consider mental health at work. Well, you know, that's really starting to get into the DNA of the industry, isn't it? When we actually get the clients on board to say that not only do we want good buildings, but we want buildings that are produced without hurting people.
Yeah.
That's really good, isn't it?
Oh, it's huge. It's a
Yeah.
massive step, and I really like your point about reflecting on how far we've come rather than looking at, okay, let's only look at the negatives. It's like, well, it's gigantic, and it really is when you reflect on it. That's a short amount of time for this amount of change to happen. It's it's impressive, and it's exciting then to think, well, if that much has changed in that short period, imagine in another 5 years, another 10 years, another 20 years, where things are going to be.
But I also think that we need to say that this was like mate was really just a seed. Without fertile soil, you don't actually get a plant. And I really think that the construction industry is unique in that way, is that right back from the introduction of superannuation, long service leave for workers in the industry, redundancy, there's a whole heap of things that the industry have a training. The industry have a long history of solving big problems collectively as an industry, rather than sort of as I'm going to get a competitive advantage as a business by doing this better, because we have a pool of labor that is actually shared between the whole industry, saying if I can lift the bar for all workers in the industry, I would actually also lift the bar for my future workers as a business within the industry.
Yeah. I love that. Well, yeah, I appreciate you making the time to come on here and have this chat. And, like I said, these are sort of short conversations, and, feel very fortunate to have people like you coming on here. We finish every one of these episodes with just 5 sort of ending questions, 5 closing questions. So I'll try and not give you anything too crazy to throw you off, but
I do crazy.
Okay, well, we'll throw a few crazy ones out there. But no, the first one is, what's your best childhood memory?
What's my best childhood? My best childhood memory was that we had a summer house where all my summers were spent in, and it was a house that my dad built by hand. And all the way through my childhood, that was where all our summer spent playing in the forest. So yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's so nice. What do you think currently is the biggest burden on mental health in society?
Thank you so much for supporting Move Your Mind. We're expanding the offerings of the organisation, and we're tailoring everything we do to suit you guys and to try and answer to all of your needs and the questions that you send in. The book is available globally. You can find all of the links at nickbracks.com/book. And we've just released the Move Your Mind community. We've currently got a men's community group, a women's community group, a general group. We're going to be loading up other groups, and you can find all of the links at moveyourmind.me. This group's been created based on the needs of what we've heard and learnt throughout running Move Your Mind. And we have live events, we've got courses, we've got huge amounts of value, the ability to share information, share ideas, work in groups together to grow and share your learnings, to learn about different topics. You get email reminders. There's a whole lot of features in there. We're constantly updating it, and we're so excited to share it with you. You can find all of the information about it at moveyourmind.me.
I think that we increasingly, even though we are as connected as we have ever been, we are also as isolated as we have ever been. I think we we are losing the community in our society. We are becoming too much individualized. There's too much about me and not enough about us.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think something has to change with that. And, technology, as good as it is leading to a lot of this isolation as well. So, yeah, very good point. What are you most afraid of?
I think that most people would like. I'm most afraid. I've had some health scares with my kids, and I'm most afraid of it. One of them one day become real.
That's a big one.
Yeah. So that would be my biggest ones.
What's your personal definition of happiness?
I think happiness is when you can sit in the moment and just really suck it in and say, this is not too bad. I don't need the roller coaster to be happy. I just need the now when things are really good around me, and just taking the time to actually embracing it and get into it.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. A really good answer. Final one. Final one here. What are you most proud of?
My kids. I'm sorry, but I think for all of us, if we have one project in life, that is to set up the next generation, and in a lot of ways, working long hours and having a career and all that, I've probably done everything practical to stuff them up, and they're still coming through all right. So, what more can you ask for?
Well, you must have done something right, mate. So yeah, appreciate that. And if anyone listening, we'll put the link for Mates in Construction in the show notes. So if anyone wants to look that up, and I want to just say to you, thank you again for making the time, and really happy that we got to get you on here and make it happen.
Not a way at all, Nick. Thank you so much for having me.
Lendlease is proudly sponsoring the Brick by Brick podcast. They're committed to the health and safety of their people and those who they work with, and have been acknowledged externally for their focus on providing healthy workplaces. Lendlease is certified as a global healthy workplace in recognition of their focus on employee health and well-being. The certification was granted by the Global Centre for Healthy Workplaces in October 2017, and in addition, they've won the multinational employer category for the 6 Global Healthy Workplace Awards. At Move Your Mind, we've been fortunate to work with Lendlease for a number of years, and we've seen firsthand that they take this seriously. They're not just trying to tick a box, they genuinely care about making change in the organisation. And further to that, Lendlease are a leader in driving the conversation about mental health on a broad level. They're not just trying to help in their organisation, it's about changing the construction industry and the way we view mental health as a whole.